Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. Heart Warriors is a series I've been guided and inspired to do thanks to my energetic connection with Kata Judah being the beautiful, sacred, masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, our sacred feminine site. So what I'm here to do is to give a platform to men so they can share their journey into the heart, their highs, their lows, tools, practices, insights, wisdom. What have they picked up along the way that they can now share with other men walking that path? And of course, us women who are walking right there beside them. Now, today's special guest, we are very honoured to have here Justin Patrick Pearce. Now, Justin is an author, an intimacy teacher, and he is founder of the Yoga of Intimacy. He offers workshops and private training to both men and women to help them overcome challenges in relationship, master the embodiment of sexual polarity, and pursue a life of spiritual depth alongside their chosen partner. He and his beautiful life partner, London Angel Winters, are parents, passionate lovers, and co-authors of the books Playing with Fire, The Spiritual Path of Intimate Relationship, and The Awakens Women's Guide to Everlasting Love. So we have lots of juicy stuff to talk about there. So very happy to welcome Justin here. Enjoy. Hello, Justin Patrick Pearce. Welcome to Heart Warriors.
Thank you for having me, Gemma.
Oh, very excited to have you here. And the topics that, this conversation is going to open up are fascinating. So I always like to start with a little bit about you, as in who's the man inside? Once you drop your labels of father and coach and intimacy expert, who's the man inside?
That's a question I've been asking myself for years. To be honest with you, the deeper I look, the less definitive answers I get. That when I look really deep at what I am, who I am, all the things that I used to believe I was quickly fall away. So a central part of my own practice, which has been there for years, has been a deep exploration, this idea of no self. It's a teaching that's one of the characteristics in Buddhism. And the first time I heard it, I couldn't possibly wrap my mind around it. I don't know if you've heard this teaching before of no self. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, well, not in depth, but aware of it. Yes.
Yeah. So the first time I heard it, I was like, I want to get this, but I can't possibly understand it. And I didn't know how to wrap my mind around it. And that's kind of the funny thing. You can't wrap your mind around it. And that's what practice has revealed to me, is that the more we practice, the more we become still, the more apparent it becomes that everything we attempt to identify ourselves with are just fleeting, temporary associations, thoughts, patterns that we try and label as I, but they all quickly unravel the deeper we sit and practice. So when you sincerely ask me the question, who am I? There is no solid answer. There is no great answer that I have, but I know that this moment in which I arise, in which we arise in, is profound. It's unbelievable. And I meet every moment with that sense of wonder and curiosity of simply not knowing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love how you explain that. Thank you, Justin. Right, let's find out a bit more, as in, I like to see what shaped the men that I interviewed to become the men they are today. So what was your major challenge as a child?
Well, I was the middle child of five. So that the middle child is always the strange one. I had an older brother who would hurt me quite regularly. I grew up in a family where there was just a lot of psychological illness, mental illness, and a lot of therapy and prescriptions. And for me in my childhood, I seemed like certainly the more normal one. Like there was nothing wrong with me, because by contrast to my siblings and other family members, I certainly seemed like I had my things together. But it wouldn't be until later in my life that I kind of realized, whoa, maybe I suffer from depression and social anxiety and all of these other things that didn't go noticed because I lived in a household where that was rampant, right? So very early on, when I was about 10 years old, I moved myself into the basement of my family house. So there's 7 people living in this house, and I decided to take the basement when I was 10 as a way to escape from everybody. And back then, I would turn off all the lights in the basement. I was terrified of my basement. I don't know, like basements are creepy. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. They're creepy. And I was drawn to the fact that I was creeped out by it. And I would turn off the lights and I would sit and I'd become still and I would just meditate for hours at a time. And I think at the time, it didn't feel like I was trying to escape, like I was hurt and just trying to get away. At the time, it just felt like fun exploration. Like I'm enjoying this. I'm enjoying closing my eyes. I'm enjoying seeing where I can go in my consciousness. But I think as I got older, as I reflect back on that time, there's certainly an element of trying to escape something, right? And I think a lot of my spiritual journey personally has been really examining the tendency we all have to escape. That in some way we're all avoiding the relationships that are presented before us, whether it's our relationship with our mother and father, our relationship with our daughter, our relationship with our lover, our relationship with our purpose, our work, our relationship with death or the divine. These are all critical aspects of our lives. And in some ways, we're always trying to avoid them in some way. We're confused or overwhelmed or bewildered by them. They're hurtful. They confuse us. So that inquiry of early on, not really knowing where I fit, not really knowing what I was even doing, but those moments of meditation became a beginning point for my spiritual path, and it started at that early age, and I just haven't turned back since.
Wow, yes, 10 is very young, isn't it, to, be getting into prolonged meditation. It's interesting how when you were talking there, the conversation evolved into escape mechanisms from emotional chaos or avoidance. But would you say, is like that said as if it was a negative connotation, but would your escape into meditation be a positive thing?
Well, that's kind of the paradox and the double-edged sword, right? Many people pursue the spiritual path to attempt to escape a difficult life, difficult emotions, a difficult mind, a difficult family. Many people jump on the meditation or spiritual bandwagon to escape something, whether it's just the things they see in the world they don't want to participate in, or they want to become a source of love and light for the world. But even in that, if we really begin to examine at the deepest level what's happening inside of us, are we attempting to escape something? Is there some attempt to escape what is? Are we trying to ascend and get to some higher place other than here? Are we dissatisfied with what is here? Are we unwilling to be loving here? Can we feel love now? We are unable to trust what is here right now. So as we start to explore these concepts of love, trust, your ability to be with what is, like truly equanimity, that's what the spiritual path is ultimately there to teach us. And that's why at the highest levels of practice, one realizes there's nowhere to escape to. There is no ascension. There's no place to go. It's our ability to be conscious love now, here, with this in equanimity, or not, or think there's someplace else to be, somewhere else to get to. So long as we're perpetuating the search, we are dissatisfied with the present moment. Our search is a confession of our dissatisfaction with what is, hoping for something else. And this is what my own practice has revealed to me over time is what are we running from? Why? What are we waiting for? What are we so dissatisfied with? Can we actually be within this moment present as love, conscious, and not need this moment to change? And once we become the bringer of conscious love, once we become the bringer of conscious love and we stop waiting for it to arrive from someplace else, we immediately become empowered. We immediately experience life in this moment the way it was meant to be experienced, as all the sages and the awakened ones teach us. There's nowhere to get to. We are here, but we have to wake up to that.
Yeah, beautiful. And I mean, you got into meditation as that escape route, but most young boys, if they were in a similar situation, would get into maybe, tobacco, alcohol, pornography, other, routes of escapism. Why do you think you got into meditation and not the other path?
I did get into the other path.
Okay.
I got heavy into sex, drugs, hallucinogenics, all of it. It was the way that I perceived what was going on was meditation, lucid dream work, um, out of body experience were all things that I was exploring. They were very similar to me as psychedelics, as LSD, as mushrooms, as ayahuasca, as MDMA, marijuana. So my tendency was just, I want to explore consciousness in every facet that it's available to me. And sex was a huge component of that too. As I talk about actually in our new book, Playing with Fire, I talk about my sexual desire. The whole book is about sexual desire and how we take it from something that's destructive and turn it into something that is ultimately loving, conscious. We alchemize desire into something that is beautiful. So I was signed up for all of it. And to me, the spiritual world and the psychedelic world were similar in certain senses. And they're all forms of escape. Even like when I was young, I was a fitness professional not so long ago. But even when I was young, I was very into fitness and working out. It didn't occur to me later on into my life, but my obsession with fitness and getting strong and having muscles was because I was abused physically by an older, bigger brother who was a professional wrestler. So even my attempt to go to the gym was a form of escaping where I didn't want to be the subject of any kind of abuse. I wanted to be strong. Even that is a function of escape. But we can absolutely turn these tendencies of escape towards something that is positive and life-giving, as opposed to something that is destructive and life-taking, right? But the mechanism of trying to escape something we are not ultimately dissatisfied with is still there. And that's a great motivator. Some of the most successful individuals I've ever spoken with, the reason they are where they are is because somewhere deep in their heart, they say to themselves, or they said to themselves, I'll show them. I'll show them. Whether it was their bully, their mom and dad who didn't believe in them, their teacher who told them they'd never go anywhere in life or amount to anything. Every profoundly successful individual has some version, most of them, some version of that story where they just have that little, I'll show them. And it's a beautiful motivator if we know what to do with it. But if we don't know how to put it in the right place, it absolutely can lead to the form of escape that is self-destructive and will ultimately lead us into a pit of despair.
Okay, Justin, can you please speak directly to the men who are watching that recognize themselves in that situation, as in, oh, I'll show them, and maybe are on the destructive path? Thank
Mhm.
you.
Yeah, there's something I created. It's called a purpose compass, and the purpose compass helps you orient yourself to know where you are at any moment in your life. So if you're a man trying to figure out what your purpose is, and that's tends to be a deeply spiritual, deeply rooted question for a lot of men who are looking to find meaning in their life. They want to find out, what is my purpose? How do I deliver my purpose? How do I fulfill my purpose before I die? What is the meaning of this? And that question kind of haunts them. Now, that question, you could do a lot of things with that. If you become overwhelmed with it, burdened by it, feel like you've been cheated or betrayed by your parents or just the position you put in, you could fall into apathy pretty quickly. You could just fall into like not really caring. And that feelings of apathy is where we go when we start drugging ourselves constantly, chronically, when we're laying around on the couch where the hours are just zipping by and we're just zoning out into social media feeds or getting lost in television or just wasting our lives, and we can feel it when we're wasting away. And that's heart-wrenching. It's not a fun place to be. And in my purpose compass, what I show is that if you're in a state of apathy, what's 1 degree above apathy is actually resentment. Resentment is a direction towards purpose. And I'll explain why, is because finding resentment in your heart, like, remember the I'll show them feeling? Like, we feel resentful for the way we were treated. We feel resentful. It creates an energy inside of us. Apathy is I don't care. Resentment, there's an energy now to work with. And in my work, what I do is I alchemize energy. So energy for me, it's not good or bad. It's just energy. It's what we do with it that's either constructive or destructive. So if you have resentment in your heart, right, which I told you a lot of successful people I know absolutely did, but resentment creates enough energy for you to say, I'll show them, and start taking chances and start taking risks you otherwise wouldn't. So having that adversary, so to speak, like, we know this is very common for like professional fighters. They need their adversary for them to become their best. And a lot of men are wired that way. So you can have a healthy, quote unquote, adversary in your heart and your mind where it's like, I'll show them, and you can alchemize that and move that towards your deepest purpose. But again, just living in resentment is not an expression of your deepest purpose, but you can use it as kind of a launch pad to move deeper into it. So deepest purpose, what is that? And a lot of men say, like, I want to find out what my deepest purpose is, but I don't know. I don't even know how to figure it out. You don't need to know what your deepest purpose is, because in truth, every step you take and every goal you achieve, the moment you achieve it, the moment you get there, you're going to look ahead. There's going to be a new goal waiting for you, a brand new one every single time. You know, a great fighter finally wins the championship belt. He celebrates in the ring for 30 seconds. He goes to the locker room, and his next thought is, okay, what's next? Who's next? Okay, let me get 2 belts, whatever. But that's the mentality. And if we understand that's how we're designed, we can make that something beautiful. But you don't need to know what your deepest purpose is. All you need to know is what fears are standing between you and your deepest purpose. Meaning, if you could do something in your life that would feel deeply meaningful to you, but also you're scared to death to do it, what is one of those fears? And it could be getting on stage speaking in front of people. It could be writing a book. It could be signing up for a martial art class. There's so many things that could be like your edge. For me, one day it was skydiving. So, like, I was terrified of heights. So cliff jumping and skydiving, I had to do it because I was afraid. That's the attitude I'm talking about. Your purpose fears are not like the same as survival fears, the fears you're running from, but it's the fears you're leaning into. And if you can just start to feel, what am I afraid of? What are those fears? Those fears will begin to guide you into your true north. and help you find what your deepest purpose ultimately is. But it's that attitude of being willing to look, what am I afraid of? Am I willing to take one step in that direction? And if you live that way and you just keep taking one step after the next, your deepest purpose will reveal itself to you.
So good, Justin. I love this. Thank you. Okay, so what would you say was your rock bottom moment as an adult? What was happening?
I feel I've had quite a few rock bottom moments.
Well, maybe one that, we can, whichever one you want to speak about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. There's different flavors of rock bottom moments. There's the ones where you're mad at yourself. I've certainly had mad at myself, take enormous amount of drugs and fall into kind of a drug hole. I've been there. I've done that. I've gone to those places, and it's almost like an attitude of just like, you feel your rock bottom, and it's almost like the attitude in you is, or in me was, can I go even further to rock bottom? Can I? Some impulse in me was like, I'm going to intentionally make myself fall further into rock bottom right now. I'm at such rock bottom. I want to know what the bottom of this pit feels like. So I would behave in ways that would take me to the bottom of that pit. And a funny thing would always happen when I would bring myself to the bottom of that pit, and you'd actually feel like the ultimate end. There'd almost be like a manic laughter that would spontaneously arise out of me every time I would hit that place. Now, this is a very destructive pattern. There's no question about it. I'm definitely fortunate to be alive today because of some of the things that I've done to myself. But I would say that a key rock bottom moment for me that I think really stands out is I think it was the third time my wife and I lost an expecting child, and we were very far into the pregnancy. So to lose at this point was incredibly devastating. She was fully pregnant. We were fully expecting, and we were just about to go on to a trip to Thailand, and it was just a couple weeks where we lost the child. And for some reason, we decided to go on the trip anyway. And we were not ourselves. We showed up to the airport, missed our flight just because our brains weren't working. Ended up getting on the next flight and going to Thailand. And I just remember sitting there with her. And we were just shadows of our former selves. We were spiritual intimacy teachers. We had a very strong practice. We knew how to be compassionate with each other. We knew how to be loving with each other. We knew how to create polarity with each other. But in this moment, we were just mourning the loss of our expectant child and mourning the loss of what felt like our relationship. And it felt like the end for both of us. And we were both at a loss. It was like there was nothing else to do. And so I found myself in moments like these throughout my life and throughout my practice, where life is going to strike you hard. It's going to pull the rug out from underneath you. But during that period of time, I had some divine intervention. Something occurred and I surrendered. I surrendered for the first time in my life. And what I mean by surrender, I don't mean I gave up. I mean, I finally stopped expecting life to be on my terms and what I wanted it to be. It's like I spoke to God and I said, look, you show me where I need to be. You show me what life is, and I'll be there as love. Whatever the moment is. And I made that commitment. And that was the strength I needed to turn around to my partner and be there for her, with her. And that was the beginning of our relationship from that point forward. I mean, we'd already been together for 5-6 years at that point, but it was the start of a brand new relationship together, one where we showed up differently with surrendered hearts. And what we were talking about at the beginning, it was the moment I stopped resisting the present moment, where I stopped trying to escape, where I stopped wishing for things to be different than they were. That was the moment. That was my moment. That was my version of that. When that avoidance actually broke. And as a result, I was able to meet the moment and show up as love, because I couldn't show up as love before that. I couldn't show up as love while I was white knuckling and wanting things to be different. I couldn't. You can't when you're in that state. So that was one of those moments for me.
Well, firstly, thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry to hear about the loss of that little baby. If I may, now this is a big subject that often when this happens, the attention is on the woman. So can you please speak to any men that are going through this or still grieving a situation that maybe happened a few years ago? And because the focus was on the woman, they maybe didn't get the attention that they needed to emotionally heal.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. I'm not really sure what to add to what you just said, because I think you make a great point there and I agree with it. I was fortunate enough to have some form of my own practice where I was sensitive to myself. I had a meditation practice. I had a practice with my partner where we knew how to heal each other through our practices. So I did have a certain support system in my life at that time, which did allow me to move through that skillfully. And certainly it took longer for my wife to heal naturally from such an experience. But I was supported in the forms of meditation, the groups I was part of, and also with my partnership. My relationship was huge. But you're right. If I didn't get any attention on that, I would certainly have carried some form of trauma, some form of wound that never would have gotten properly looked at. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It can be just as devastating for a man as it is for a woman when the two of you are really committed to bringing life into this world, and to then feel those losses between each other. It can be crippling for both of you. So I appreciate you speaking to that, because men should know they should have a place to process that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Okay, well, let's get into some of the beautiful wisdom and insights that you have around relationships and polarity and intimacy. So, you're the founder of the Yoga of Intimacy. What does Yoga of Intimacy mean?
Very simply put, yoga of intimacy is a place where you go to learn how to be intimate with a partner, or you could with a practice partner. But you're learning what intimacy is. You're learning how to create intimacy. You're learning how to sustain intimacy. And you're doing it not from a place that's intellectual, but you're doing it from a place that is completely embodied. And that's why this is a form of yoga. Sacred sexuality is a form of yoga. Um, so when we learn how to communicate intimacy and be intimate without even saying a word, we start to tap into the deeper layers of our own intimacy. Something comes online that we can't create by talking about it. Because sex doesn't happen merely through speech. You could use words while having sex, and it could be very sexual. But conventional conversation is not how we make love. We make love body to body. So the yoga is so important because it teaches you how to get into your body. It teaches you how to breathe. It teaches you how to stand. It teaches you how to sit. It teaches you in what ways you're using your body that's turning your partner off. It teaches you what ways you can use your body to turn your partner on. And what I love about this body of work is it doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter which gender you are. It doesn't matter how much money you make or don't make. This has nothing to do with status or superficial aspects of what we think is attractive and sexy. It has nothing to do with any of it. And to me, that's the most profound aspect of this practice, because it's literally for anyone who wants to learn how to be a more skillful lover. And if you just have the interest, this body of work can show you how. You don't need a six pack or this or that, the other thing. All you need is a sincere commitment to figure out, I wonder what yogic intimacy is. I wonder what polarity is. I wonder how I'm sabotaging polarity in my life. And when I say the word polarity, I don't know how many people know that word, but polarity means sexual attraction to another person, like just feeling that spark of attraction. That's polarity right there in a nutshell. But there's so many ways that we are unconsciously sabotaging polarity, meaning turning our partner off or turning the person we want to attract off. And we don't know how we're doing it. It's those unconscious patterns that tend to create the biggest problems in our life around love and sex. But when you make those something that is conscious, where you know, oh, that's turning them off. Oh, when I do that, wow, when I breathe shallow and I collapse into my solar plexus and I start scratching my face, that's when they're losing sexual attraction. Got it. Okay. I wonder what I would need to do to create a little more turn on here. Maybe I can uncross my arms, place my palms face down on my thighs. I could open my solar plexus. I could breathe more deeply. I could breathe deeply down in my belly and my genitals. I could make eye contact and hold it strongly. Now, suddenly, no matter what you look like or who you are, your body mind is more available for love and intimacy. You embody a kind of confidence that wasn't there before. And that confidence is sexy, whether you're a man or a woman. Confidence is sexy. So when you embody that because you know how to, that becomes your foundation. And you're able to create not only incredible experiences intimately, but you're able to create an incredible relationship, a committed long-term relationship. And that's one of the things that London and I are advocates of, because there are a lot of intimacy teachers who are single, single without kids and different scenarios. And one thing that London and I really want to teach from our unique perspective is, hey, we've been in a 12-year relationship, monogamous. We have a 4.5-year-old. Like, we're in the weeds with you guys. So if long-term relationships are your excuse or having kids is your excuse, but no, I've got solutions regardless of what your situation is. London and I we're co-workers. We work together. We're best friends and we're lovers. That's a lot of dynamics to juggle. So one of the key things that we teach is the 3 ways of relating. And people can learn more about that in our books. But the 3 ways of relating is teaching you that your relationship with your partner, when you're running your household together, when you're both got jobs or both parenting together, that's one way of relating you have with your partner. And it's not going to feel sexy most of the time. Another way of relating you can have with your partner is feeling like your best friends. You can talk about anything. You feel like emotionally safe with your partner, like you love to share at the end of your day. No one needs to be in charge. You can just play and have fun. That's a best friend dynamic. And that too is a unique expression of relationship. Too much of that, you'll start feeling more like buddies, friends, or roommates, and you'll also lose that sexual spark in that dynamic. So polarity is that 3rd way of relating where you can intentionally create that spark that you want to have with your lover, and you can maintain the heat of attraction as if you just met. In fact, it gets better over the years because both of you learn how to turn each other on very skillfully. So what London and I are really advocates for is working with couples who are wanting to figure out, how do I have it all? How do I have the aspect of my life, my relationship as partners, that we can trust each other is solid, where we could be best friends is solid, and where we can have that passionate spark still igniting 12, 20, 30 years down the road. So that's what we're really passionate about teaching.
So how can men have it all? Give us some tips, please, Justin. I mean, of course, we're going to put your books on, but, for the men listening, that give them an insight. How can they have it all?
Yeah. So I want to be clear. I'm going to try and speak as clearly as I can to convey something, but it has to be understood that all of these principles take practice. So we can hear them, but until we actually understand what it is to implement these techniques and live them, we can't necessarily achieve this. It's just like if we were talking about yoga right now and you're like, how does someone become flexible? I can tell you, but until they go and they do the yoga, they're not becoming more flexible. And that's why this practice is a yoga as well. You have to show up to the practice and stretch and stretch and stretch. But what is the first starting point for a lot of people? One is being able to identify the three ways of relating. Okay. So there's certain ways that we behave as men and then our partners behave, right? Now, most of the time when we're relating to each other, everyone's an alpha. There's a lot of alpha. I call it alpha. So I don't know if your audience is familiar with the language I use, but alpha could be traditionally considered the masculine. Like when you talk about sacred sex, the masculine pole, masculine represents consciousness. We've made a conscious choice to move away from the terms masculine, feminine, because consciousness has no gender. We're talking about consciousness. And men and women equally have the capacity to be conscious and embody consciousness. And that's actually what we're seeing in our world. Women are far more embodying consciousness in the Western world now than they've ever been before, and they're playing that role. So when they're showing up in their alpha and men are showing up in alpha, that's going to create a resonant experience for both partners. If you're both in the work world, if you're both managing things, if you're both earning money, if you're both making decisions, if you're both co-parenting, that is a lot of decision making and alpha. Now, alpha is great, as I said, for powerful partners, but it can also be terrible for butting heads. It's like, I'm in charge. No, I'm in charge. Do it this way. No, do it this way. Are you sure about that? I need you to do this. Well, I need you to do this. Boom, boom, boom. That's alpha, right? That can be a gift if you know how to come together, just like you would in like an office place. Like if you had coworkers where you're coming together on a project, that's alpha energy, right? In the office space, those are alpha environments, because we're trying to build a relationship that's based on mutual trust. A job needs to get done. Can I trust you to do your part? Can you trust me to do mine? Are we on the same team? Shake, let's go do it. And then we can do it. That's alpha. And you need to know when you and your partner are in alpha, because if you don't, you'll think intimacy and sexual attraction has just gone away and you'll have no idea how to get it back. But all you're actually doing is just relating in resonance with your partner in alpha. So being able to identify that first and foremost is really critical. Are we in alpha together right now? Oh, that's why we're wanting to strangle each other. Got it. Okay. As I said before, the next mode of relating is omega. And kind of to give you a sense is if alpha is like, I'm in charge. No, I'm in charge. Then omega is, what do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? I don't know. What do you want to do? That's omega, where nobody's leading. There's no lead. There's no direction to anything. There's just this flow that's constantly whatever goes, whatever this, whatever that. Now, in my own experience, when not all the time, but most of the time when men have that flowy, whatever attitude, they'll attract a very alpha woman who is very because they fit together. Alpha and omega, they fit together, right? But then they both get resentful at each other. She's like, why isn't he more alpha? And she's like, well, how come she's not more omega? Like they're mad about it, but they're the ones creating that pattern, right? So omega is just like that flowy love experience, and knowing when no one's in the lead, no one's taking charge, no one's keeping a schedule, no one knows what time this is going to happen, everyone's showing up late to everything. It's a very watery dynamic, and eventually that spark and those flames of sexual attraction are going to get drowned out, totally neutralized in that field if there's too much of that way of relating. So the next way of relating is polarity, where one of you brings alpha and one of you brings omega. One of you brings the trustworthy energy. One of you brings the energy of nourishing love, love flow. One of you brings more of a penetrative, grounded energy. The other one brings more of a penetrable, receptive energy, right? And that's the thing. Alpha energy is penetrative. Because if you're going to complete a task, you have the ability to overcome obstacles, penetrate the world, and accomplish something, even if challenges rise up. That's your alpha, your ability to penetrate. If you want to go into omega, you have to become penetrable. You have to let down the vigilance and actually start to open and receive. And that receptivity creates an opportunity then for alpha to penetrate. And that's what sex ultimately is. It's one partner penetrating the other, whether with their eyes, with their heart, with their phallus, whatever it is, there's a penetration and receiving penetration. So that's how it all kind of plays out. And just being aware of those dynamics first step. And then the next step is knowing now how to consciously change the way of relating when you want to. Knowing how to snap out of alpha alpha, knowing how to snap out of omega omega, knowing how to create polarity, knowing how to go back to alpha alpha when polarity is no longer appropriate, right? So those are some of the basic foundations, but there's tons of practices and learnings that we do that help you figure out how to do this with your body.
Justin, it's easy for most people to understand the penetrative energy in regards to sex. But how does it play out in the emotional or mental fields? Can you give men some understanding of those dynamics there?
Yeah, absolutely. So a therapist and their patient is a perfect example of polarity. The therapist is alpha and the patient is omega. Because the therapist isn't spilling their guts and sharing, oh, well, this happened to me today, and you wouldn't believe what's going on with my mother-in-law. You're like, that's not happening with your therapist. If it is, you might look into a different therapist. But the therapist is there, sometimes with a notepad, and they're basically saying, I see. What else are you feeling? I see. How does that make you feel? I see. And they are seeing, they're the seer. Remember, we talked about consciousness. Consciousness is the witness. So when they say, I see, they are seeing you. So alpha is transcending their own emotions so they can put their attention on yours. That's when you're an alpha. When you transcend your own emotions, your own feelings, and you're able to locate your attention on someone else's heart, on someone else's feelings. You're able to hold space for them, so to speak. That's what a therapist does, right? And they're trained to do it, and they have specific rules so they don't go into omega. They're not allowed to share personal information because it would create omega energy and compromise the trust of the container. That's one of the energetics there. When you're the patient, you're an omega. So you lay on the couch and you go, I feel this, and now I feel this, and now I feel this. You're either excited to say it or reluctantly say it, but you're saying, I feel. Omega is the feeler. Omega is the one who doesn't transcend, but immerses into emotion and feels deeply, feels sensitively, feels what's happening in the emotional and the physical body, and then says, I feel. Omega is the one being witnessed. So alpha is the witness. Omega is the one being witnessed, and that creates polarity. And that polarity that's happening in a therapist's office has a healing property to it because polarity is healing. Now, hopefully, those don't become sexual because they're not supposed to. There's a container around it. But that's why a lot of people fall in love with their therapists, because they're finally getting some alpha energy that they're not getting from anyone else in their lives. And that polarity that gets created can be very intoxicating because it's polarizing, right? So we think about what is it to bring alpha energy? It's that therapist energy. But we can do it less clinically and more as a lover. And that's kind of where the yoga of intimacy comes into place, because you're not just sitting there and saying to your partner, how are you feeling right now? Tell me more. And that's nice. You can do that. It's medicine. But if you want to make love to it, but London and I teaches the I see, I feel practice. So a man would be sitting in front of a woman and he may say something like, I see a tender heart. I see lips I want to kiss. I see the woman I love. I see how hard things are for you right now. Those are same expressions of seeing, but seeing into her heart, not as a therapist, but as a lover. And then she might respond to each of those. I feel seen. I feel deeply loved by you. I feel how present you are with me right now. I feel like I want to climb on top of you. So she might say those are her feelings. So again, it's the same model as therapy. I see, I feel. But this is what it looks like when lovers practice it. So one of our foundational practices is the I see, I feel practice. And we teach couples how to see and feel in a way that creates healing and sexual energy just by in the ways that you're seeing and feeling. It's incredible. And we also teach them through that practice how the way they express what they see and feel is done where it creates damage, and it's done with hostility, and it's done in a way that's actually creating more hurt and less love. And that's most of us do that. I still do that. We all do that in our low moments, right? But to become conscious of what are you seeing, what are you feeling, and how are you saying in a way where it's actually an attack, where it's now hostile, where now you're not creating more love or healing, you're creating division. We teach them how to take what they see and feel and learn how to express in a way that creates healing and sexual turn on. And you don't need to feel differently than you do in order for that to happen. We're not bypassing your hurt emotions or dark emotions. We're not afraid of emotions, or all of them are welcome. That's the attitude. And the moment all of the emotions are welcome, that's when real healing can actually start to take place. And that's when you become someone capable of making love through all of the emotions, making love through. And that's what this practice is ultimately here to teach us, is if you learn how to show up to any emotion and learn how to make love from that place through those wounds, you will always be able to create love in your life. Always. And that's what we're here to learn.
Beautiful. Thank you, Justin. I'm interested in the dynamics of men and emotions within relationships, because as you were saying here with the alpha and omega, a beautiful healing practice to be able to share emotions. But within a relationship, what do you say is a healthy dynamic for men to be sharing emotions with their partner?
Yeah, so that's a really powerful question, and there's an art form to it. There's no doubt, because the man who never shares any emotion, that's not going to go well, and she's going to struggle to trust him. The man who's always sharing his emotions constantly, she's not going to be able to trust him either. She's like, wow, how come I'm holding more space for you than you're holding for me? Like, I've got myself more together than you. She can't trust that guy. And it's also difficult to trust the guy who's solid stone and so cold, never expresses a feeling. It's not going to open her to as deeply as she could be opened. So there's a middle ground. There's a middle path here where one of the foundational things I'll teach is men how to say I feel in front of their partner, with a woman, their female partner, while she's an alpha seeing him. Now, one of the new chapters in our book, Playing with Fire, is I wrote a chapter called When You Don't Feel Like Feeling, because When I first created this practice, I felt my own fears and resistances to doing it. And that's why I knew it was medicine for me. We talked about the purpose compass and how you feel into the fear. And if you follow it, you'll find your purpose there. So I was trained more traditionally in like sexual polarity, where I was always supposed to be the masculine. She was always supposed to be the feminine. So like to go up to her and be like, I feel, I feel, I feel was almost like an inversion of what I was taught. Like I would almost be like made fun of for these techniques and practices in my old world, right? But I knew there was a deeper wisdom here available for me. I knew there's a deeper, richer wisdom here available for men and women altogether. Because I noticed in myself my resistance to honestly say, I feel in front of my partner. What am I trying to escape? What am I avoiding? And I noticed if I didn't say it to her out loud, because I'm trying to protect her, I don't want to burden her worse than she's already burdened. Like all of the stories come up of why I'm not going to share what I feel with her, right? I'm going to be the man, I don't want to lay more on her. But when those feelings get stuck in me, what do I do with them next? I start to implode, or some men explode. And that implosion looks like, okay, let me turn to the bottle. Let me turn to some drugs. Let me turn to some destructive behavior. Let me swallow this deeper. And that's a tendency men have because they're not skilled at I feel. They're not skilled at crying, right? So they're trying to find ways to deal with the knot that's inside of them. And by consuming substances or ejaculating chronically, you're not going to release that knot. You're just going to tighten the knot and become number. And the more numb you become, the more distant you're going to become from your intimate partner. And the intimacy you once had is going to feel like it's gone within, a few years, few more years. And that's the beginning of the end, when you turn away and you withdraw and you fall into that knot. And again, I'm a human being who has all those tendencies still in my body mind. Like that was my way. So I know that path intimately. I know where it goes. I know what it feels like. I know what all of the impulses in the body mind. I know what all the thoughts are. That's how I was wired. So to recognize that that path leads into a pit of despair. I'm going to fight for my relationship. And what does that look like? It looks like me being willing and able to share the truth of my heart. Not as some vile attack, but just as something vulnerably. And I sit in front of my partner and she sits in front of me. And I just find the words and maybe it comes out something like, I feel like a failure. I feel like I'm letting you down. I feel like shit. I feel like I've lost my purpose. So all of those types of things may come out of me in such a moment. But when you find the strength to bring them out of you and let them come to light, it creates an opportunity then for rapport. It creates an opportunity then for those things to be seen. And the power of just seeing someone's heart, seeing someone's feelings without judging them, without commenting on them, without correcting them, without telling them, hey, well, guess what? This is what you need to do. Because you probably go to a lot of your like guy friends. And if you said that shit to them, they'd be like, oh, stop being such a pussy. What you need to do is X, Y, Z. That's not the space where this gets healed. The way this gets healed is in a way where you can say, I feel, and have someone holding presence for that. And that's why men's circles, men communities are great, because a lot of men's circles have figured that out. And a lot of them will do those types of techniques where men can share, I feel, or emote, and men are just holding space because it's intuitively understood that that creates a healing for men. And it is. It's the most powerful healing that you can possibly have. And for those men who are on the call who might be like loners, like lone wolves, I'm more like a lone wolf type dude. I'm not necessarily a community guy. I've done a lot of community stuff, but I'm more of a lone wolf. You can get the same value out of this practice if you sit in meditation and close your eyes and just notice what you feel. And for 10 minutes, just say, I feel. I feel, and just keep naming what you feel. Maybe you feel tingling in your feet. Maybe you feel buzzing in your head. But don't just stay on the physical sensations. Get deeper into the emotional. I feel aching. I feel frustration. I feel deep anger. I feel like wanting to destroy something right now. So, like, let yourself go into not just the physical sensation, but also the emotional. I feel. Do it for 10 minutes, man. And then for the next 10 minutes, you're going to keep your eyes closed and you're going to do an I see practice. And you're going to see into yourself and see your own heart. You can do it in front of a mirror if you want. You can do it with your eyes closed. But you just close your eyes and say, I see a knot in the center of my chest. I see a man who's committed to showing up. I see a frustrated boy. I see a will that's committed to succeeding and taking one more step forward. So all of that, you speak to yourself and you can internalize, I see, I feel, and create that healing within yourself. If you don't have anyone else, you don't have a community to turn to. You don't need to wait. You can have that available to you right now.
So powerful, amazing. Thank you for that, Justin. So a lot of women watch this, and I know, I like to get the information out about men, but obviously healthy emotional women and healthy emotional men go together in relationships. So when the man is there saying, I feel, a knot, or I feel like a failure, you already said for us not to comment, not to offer advice. Like, what do we do? Do we just sit there? Do we touch him, hold his hand? Like, are we expressive? How can we help our men?
So this is a great question again. And the way that I'm describing this, like the I feel, I see language, it's very formal. It's very structured because we practice this with couples in a formal setting, in a formal container where both partners are intentionally practicing these techniques. By practicing the techniques, you then can learn how they apply in more organic situations where it's more spontaneous and it would answer all of those questions that you have in a different way. But in terms of formal practice, let's just go there for a moment. The first thing that would happen is if it was a man and woman and the man was an omega, I feel, then the woman would be playing the role of alpha, I see. So each time he says, I feel, she would reflect back, I see.
Okay.
He says, I feel, she would reflect back, I see. She's not trying to touch him. And again, because we're doing this as lovers, she's not bringing mommy energy. She's not like, oh, it's okay, don't worry. She's sitting there in front of him, trusting him that he can be feeling what he's feeling and not needing him to change. That's alpha's job. If she's like, oh, poor boy, or oh, let me say something sweet so he doesn't think that anymore. That's the wrong energy. The energy is actually going to serve him, is being present with him, trusting that he's got this, he can feel this, and he's still going to be okay. But the gift you bring is saying, I see. So I described that moment where I was with my wife and I was like totally at one of my low points. And I was saying things like, I feel like a failure. I feel lost right now. Because we had this practice, my wife just was present with me. And she responded, she said, I see my warrior. And I see that your heart is battered right now. And you just need to rest. I see the man that I trust. So she's saying that to me while I'm confessing I'm at my lowest. Well, what happens then? I crack. Tears start streaming down my eyes. I mean, I can get emotional right now just thinking about that moment. Because what did she do? She just saw me. She saw the truth of my heart and who I am. And she saw it in the way that was true for her too. It was the truth. It was the truth. And just being seen without being corrected or supported or coached or coddled, none of it. Just pure seeing, just pure witness, just pure witness. That's the medicine. And one of the traps a lot of modern couples fall into is they immediately go to the coaching dynamic and they try and coach their partner. That dynamic is one of the fastest ways to kill polarity in a relationship, one of the fastest ways to kill sexual attraction when the two of you are overcoaching each other. There's going to be time when advice serves. It's a good thing to have good advice from someone you trust. I asked my wife for advice. She asked me for advice. But we will never give advice if it's not asked for, because that is a recipe for depolarizing the relationship. So don't coach him. See him. Actually see him. Actually just see him as he is. And then if you have something in your heart that you see that you want to say, you say, I see how hard you work. See the man that I trust. Whatever it is, whatever's true. That is the medicine that heals as lovers, as lovers.
So powerful. I'm really keen because you're number 81 Heart Warrior. So all the interviews I've done before this question of polarity has come up a lot. And I, like to sort of get each man's idea of it as an individual man, now not polarizing a relationship, because some polarity coaches are teaching that, a healthy man should be in the top 20%, like 80% masculine, for example, or 90% masculine, 10-20%. Others are saying 50-50. And, we've got, so I just like to ask your opinion, your professional and personal opinion for the men out there who are struggling with this. What are your thoughts around these figures?
Yeah, I've heard all of the arguments. I've even taught some of those models, and I've seen the impact they have. As a result, I created the model that I teach now. And what is the answer? It's 100% and 100%. 100% you cultivate your alpha. 100% you cultivate your omega. You should be just as aware as you are sensitive. You should be just as present as you are devotional and selfless. You should be just as worthy of trust and capable of love. So in our model, men and women are equally responsible for these cultivations. They're equally responsible for being aware, sensitive, equanimous, meaning non-reactive. It's both their responsibility. It's both their responsibility to be passionate and in their desire of I want. It's both their responsibility to be present. It's both their responsibility to be devotional, right? And for anyone who doesn't know, as is described in this 80-20 or 90-10 kind of principle, the masculine brings presence and awareness, consciousness. The woman brings sensitivity, expression, devotion, and love. And they're gender-based and very separate. And what they're saying is men should be 80% just present and aware, and only 20% the other. That model breaks down. It doesn't withstand the test of time, nor does it support most modern relationships today, where the polarities are flipping much more constantly. People are unaware how common the switching of polarities are, the resonant fields are in these days in our modern relationships. So both partners must cultivate alpha and omega. Both partners must be just as good at seeing as they are at feeling. Yes. They must be able to be in the present moment. They must be able to both bring non-reactivity to the relationship, right? So this is where we flip the paradigm. We say, cultivate both to their maximum, because you are consciousness and you are light. You are consciousness and you are love. You're not merely one or the other. You are both. And that's why this is a non-dual spiritual practice. If our goal in this practice is to just continue to clench onto the illusion of duality, then we've missed the point entirely. The point of this practice is to recognize the non-dual condition of the one that is. We study polarity not to obsess over our differences, but to realize them for the illusion that they are.
Oh, brilliant. Love that breakdown. Okay, so some men that are coming into awareness of polarity and the spark of playing with fire. I love that title. Is that, you know, with the dynamics of the polarity, and maybe they're in the dating scene, you know, and they're just not making those connections with women, and they're struggling. Can you give them a couple of polarity tips too that maybe they're just not aware of?
And you're saying this would be for the men in the dating scene.
Yes.
Mm. Well, if you're wanting to be polarizing as alpha, the most important thing you can do is be purposeful. So this is why, for example, if you go to a bar or a club, the guys who are going to have the easiest time picking up are going to be the bartenders and the bar owners, because they have a purpose for being there. The bouncers, they have a purpose for being there. They're there for a purpose. Just that principle, that they're there for a purpose. They're more comfortable in their bodies. They've got things to accomplish, so they move in ways that are purposeful and intentional. So bartenders, bouncers, and club owners, they're going to do fine in the dating pool if they want. They can leverage all of those. If you're just a guy who's in there meandering, you don't have any really deep purpose, you're just there kind of hunting, you're not as high on the totem pole, so to speak, when it comes to alpha energy. So what you want to feel, and this is really what I encourage all the men I work with, is what's your purpose for being there? Do you have a purpose for being there? What is your purpose for being there? Wherever you go. And wherever you go, be on your purpose. Be clear on your purpose. That might be going to a coffee spot and writing because your purpose is to write. So you're in a coffee joint, you're doing your purpose, you feel on purpose, you're writing, and then suddenly that energy is enough to create a feeling in somebody else and open a conversation. And that conversation is interesting because you're on purpose. But it's important to always recognize that when you are on purpose, you will automatically feel more attractive. Know why you're there, know what you're up to, have an intention that goes beyond just picking somebody up. Where are you going? Where are you going? And move through the world purposefully. Whether you're at a coffee shop or you're at the gym or you're here or there, know what your purpose is. Feel yourself going there. Stay concentrated on your purpose. And that will create a gravity around you where the woman who's right for you will cross your path. Just make sure you're not so just make sure you're not so focused on your purpose you forget to look around once in a while and see what's available for you, because that also happens, right? Be on purpose, keep your eyes open, look around. And another thing that's very important is be social. Say hi to everybody, say hello, walk into a space, say, hey, how you doing, how's it going? Wherever you are, be social, because that social energy is contagious and it gives you the confidence and kind of like a social lubricant where you have the confidence to open up a conversation with anybody. So you combine that purposefulness with the receptivity of being social, and you've got a really powerful opportunity to meet someone that you might like.
Such good advice. Justin, what would you say was from your clients, what's the major challenge at the moment in relationships?
Confusion around the three ways of relating.
Okay.
Men and women equally bringing alpha and omega to the relationship, and neither partner knowing about those things or knowing why they're suddenly now fighting or don't feel attracted, or it's very overwhelming. It's like the model was easier if we go back to like 1950s, like businessman in the suit and housewife, because like the roles were designated, right? But it's liberating for all of us to find our true selves, like our full spectrum of what's possible, like to liberate ourselves out of the dogmas. And that's what this path is about. This path isn't about becoming dogmatic about masculine and feminine. This path is about liberating yourself completely as a human being, knowing yourself limitless as love and making love from that place, making art from that place. So in that sense, it's Men and women would be deeply served by understanding what the three ways of relating are and knowing how to snap out of those ways of relating when they don't want to be in them anymore. But that's the biggest problem I see is modern couples are flipping, reversing polarities, moving into resonance, moving back to polarity, having it the other way around. And they have no idea what's happening to them. And it's creating so much confusion and frustration that's really unnecessary. And as you just, as I say, is the more we liberate ourselves, the more responsibility we have. Right. So when we become both alpha and omega, it's not now less responsibility, it's more. You have to be conscious of the impact that has, because it has a massive impact. And as long as we're waking up with that and being conscious of the way we wield our alpha and omega, we can have it all. But it's going to start with that awareness.
Yeah, so good. And you also to help clients, couples, to pursue a life of spiritual depth alongside their chosen partner. Now, let's go into this, please, Justin. Please, first of all, give me your overview around that, and then I'll see if I have any further questions.
You mean just what is depth?
Well, spiritual depth, how can they pursue a path of spiritual depth within the relationship?
Depth gets created through discipline. So, if you want to have a deep martial arts practice, you need to show up to martial arts a lot. You got to go through the movements. If you want to have a deep, musical practice, you got to practice your instrument a lot. If you want to have deep spiritual practice, you got to show up to the cushion a lot. You got to meditate. You got to do yoga. If sexual yoga is your practice, then you got to do a lot of sexual yoga. You've got to show up day after day, month after month, year after year, and that ultimately creates depth. But there's no substitute. There's no hack for that. You actually have to sit through the difficult, boring moments to earn your stripes, to have that depth. But that's all that it takes. Is it just takes that commitment. And that's the other thing is it sounds like a lot, but it's actually really, really easy because it doesn't require something magical or mystical happening to you. All it takes is your commitment to showing up and saying, I'm going to show up for this meditation for 10 minutes every day. I'm going to show up to this practice with my intimate partner. And that moment you show up, you start to create that depth, but you got to show up. So that's the key in getting there. That's what that depth is. It's your capacity to show up and keep showing up, keep showing up. And naturally you will find depth. Depth will find you.
What do you say to couples where the woman is more into these spiritual practices of meditation and yoga and really wants to explore that also in the sexual realm, but the man isn't as into it?
Yeah. That can commonly be the case. Men might be more interested in work per se, sports, things like that, not really into meditative spiritual. In fact, traditionally in India, most men wouldn't start their spiritual path until their careers were over. They did the family life they provided, and then they would turn to these sorts of practices. It's kind of this new trend and fad that all the youth are really like into it and living it at an early age, which is amazing. It's great that we have this now. I'll say this is it takes time as a practitioner of sexual yoga to really start to understand this. But it doesn't matter if your partner knows how to practice or not. If you're a strong practitioner, you can invite anyone into your practice, and your invitation will be so decadent, so delightful, so nourishing, so erotic that they're going to want it. that you invite them into your practice in such a way. Like there's a different idea. It's like coming into the man and being like, hey, you need to be more intimate with me. I set up some cushions. Come over here and sit down with me. We need to do this I feel practice that Justin was talking about. Who's Justin? Guy sounds like an idiot. Like, I'm gonna kill that guy. What did he say? Like, that's never going to accomplish it. That's not what a skillful practitioner would do. A skillful practitioner would be, okay, there's my man on the couch. He's zoning out. I'm going to put on my sexiest outfit. I'm going to light some candles and make myself feel good. I'm going to slowly just begin moving in a way that's just at the periphery of his vision and see if he starts to notice. But I'm not really going to care. And then if he starts to notice, maybe I'll start to move closer to him. And maybe I've got some grapes and a glass of wine. And suddenly now I put a grape inside of his mouth. And suddenly you're in a sexually yogic experience. And before you know it, the television is off. You can start getting on his belly. You could say, I want you to breathe me. I want to feel your breath deep inside of me. And he's like, what the fuck what is this? And you're just like, I want you to breathe deeply. And suddenly he's breathing like a yogic practitioner because he's watching you be turned on and opened as it. That is how, whether you're a man or woman, you bring your practice to your lover and you create the intimate moment you're wanting to experience. That's the difference between someone who doesn't really know how to practice and someone who absolutely does. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. Love it so much. Thank you. Now, Justin, you've published a book called The Awakened Woman's Guide to Everlasting Love, which I actually bought a couple of weeks ago, but I'm in the middle of moving house, so it's in one of my boxes of books, but I'm definitely going to read it. But what I wanted to ask you, if you were to write a book called The Awakened Man's Guide to Everlasting Love, what would be a couple of the major points?
Yeah. Well, I just want to say for the viewers, anyone listening or watching, I'm co-author of The Awakened Woman's Guide, so it's primarily written by my wife, but I speak into it. We wrote it together for sure, but she's the narrator. It's speaking to women, so I don't want to think like I'm writing a book for women. But my voice is in there. I share stories and all of that. So that book is a woman's guide, and we wrote it because we knew women were more so interested in the subject matter, and we just had it. Just was a spontaneous thing. It happened. Our new book, Playing with Fire, is that book you just said. What is the man's awakened guide? Playing with Fire is that guide. But Playing with Fire is written for men, women, singles, and couples. That was our goal. We did the thing for women. Now we wanted to create a book for wherever you are in relationship. This book will apply to you and serve you, whether you're dating, whether you've been in a relationship for 30 years, whether you're on the verge of divorce, whether you want to just figure out how to have the most ecstatic sexual experiences. This book spells it all out in incredible detail, and it also actually has a practice manual in the back, so you and your partner can go step by step through all of the practices that London and I teach. It's all in there.
Oh, well, I'm definitely going to get that one as well. Awesome. Sounds amazing. Justin, we've got about 15 minutes left. I always like to open up the conversation to maximize your experience and wisdom. So, what else needs to be brought into this conversation in regards to men, masculinity, relationships, the healing journey that we haven't touched on?
Well, I think the world is in a pretty wild position at this time, and I think everyone can feel it. And it can feel overwhelming, if we're listening to social media, we're listening to the televisions, we're listening to what's going on in the world. It's quite a wild trip that we're all in together right now. And kudos to anyone who can find the time and really devote their attention to a conversation like this right now through those weeds, right? Takes a lot for an individual to stay concentrated on relationship or love or bettering themselves in the midst of all that's happening now. But I would say that for me, my philosophy is pretty simple. I really think loving other human beings is one of the hardest things for a human being to do. I get the privilege of working with really remarkable human beings, and every single person that I meet, I observe how difficult it is for them to love the person they've chosen to love. It's really hard to love another human being. It's incredibly difficult. And practicing it and studying it, it really humbles me, what it takes to live as love, just to even love another person, whether it's your intimate partner or a child or a parent. And I think a lot of us have these huge visions how we want to go save everybody. We want to go heal everybody. We want to go love everybody. Like with this big sweeping thing, this vision that we're going to. And we need people like that. That's important. That's critically important. But we can't overlook the relationship that's right here with us now, with the person that's sitting in front of us. And if we can't figure that one out, we've got work to do. We've got work to do. And it's better we humble ourselves and say, hey, let me just try and figure out how to love one human being well. And I don't just mean just kind of getting along and doing the routine and loving them in that way. I mean loving them. I mean deeply, profoundly loving another human being. Why not? You're choosing to be with them. You might as well learn how to love them well. And I think if we learn how to love just one human being, this entire world would shift on its axis in the most profound way. If we could learn how to just love one, and that's a tall order. To love one person well, that's a huge order. And I think it's enough to occupy our attention for a whole lifetime. But if we can do it, if we just even put some effort into it, I believe that will ripple out into everyone that we touch, everyone that we talk to, every life. We start there. So that's what I believe would truly serve this world in a very powerful way. Can you just love the one person that lies in bed next to you, that you've chosen to love? Can you just love them well?
Profound. Love that. Love that. Let's explore the within your father, your husband, like what is the priority around those things? Like children are very demanding time wise. How do fathers juggle their constant demand for their attention from their wife, their children, their purpose?
Yeah. So the way that my wife and I raise our child is, we don't have a nanny or anything. We're both full-time parents and we're both fully involved. And, my wife's a coach, so she'll do days where she's coaching and I'm with my daughter. There's other days I'm coaching, she's with the daughter. And then I'll drive her to school. My wife will make her dinner. I'll give her a bath. So we have very specific tasks, but we don't do them together. We kind of divide and conquer, so to speak. We know what her role is, what my role is, and we show up. But we're both full-time parents. We love it. We want to be. We want to raise our child like that. It's what we choose. We're so happy to have one after, the story I shared with you, and there were others. So we are grateful to have a child. In our world, my relationship with my wife is up here, up at the top, and that includes our sexual intimacy together, not just how we're talking or getting along, but how are we intimately engaged, because that's a critical component to intimacy. We keep that fire lit. That's just as important to us as being good parents. And that those two are just as important to being great teachers, bringing our gift to the world. So our commitment to our own practice and our relationship, top priority. Being great parents to our child, top priority. And then bringing that gift to the world, top priority. We keep all three of them at the top. One is not more important than the other. They are all equally important. And because they're equally important, that's what has us get up in the morning at 5 a.m. before our daughter wakes up, so we can do our practices, so we could do I see, I feel, so we can make love yogically, so we can reconnect, so we can work on whatever there's need to be worked on. And then the alarm goes off at 7 a.m. We bow to each other and we turn and we become parents and mom and dad. And there's no polarity, no polarity. Now it's just, she's just, chaos mode. And we're like, delightfully so, right? It's rough. It's rough. But if we don't have polarity for the whole rest of the day, that's okay. Because we got to parent and we need to do things like this. We need to bring our gift to the world. We need to work, right? But we prioritize all of them because we recognize those are the elements that keep this life full, rich, rewarding. This life that I have now. And I'll just share, I know I mentioned like substances and drugs. I've been clean now for 6 years or something like this. It's been a while. But the highs I experienced from my life, I couldn't get there when substances were part of my life. There's something that becomes available to us in life when we show up at the edge of purpose, when we show up at the edge of love, where we give ourselves so deeply that we are present and attentive in every moment, where we feel purposeful in every moment. And it's a gift. It's a gift that I didn't know was available to me in my youth. And I'm really fortunate that I ended up here. So many moments in my life where there's that fork in the road, and I could have just as easily gone another direction at any one of those moments. And I feel very fortunate to be where I am now. And I've gained the wisdom from my practice such that I can actually live and breathe it. And just, if I can just be an example for others. I'm not trying to fix anybody. I'm not trying to save the world. My commitment is to understanding what this work is, living it, breathing it honestly. And if that inspires you, then I'm so excited to share what I can with you and help you find this too. That's my commitment, is I always want to empower all of my students, all of my clients, empower them to say, you can have this. Here's what it takes. Go get it. Go create it. That's how I live.
So inspiring, Justin. So please, we'll drop all your links below, but please let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm on justinpatrickpierce.com. That's my website, and you'll find all of our offerings there. We have the Yoga of Intimacy, which is 4 weekend intensives we do every year, where men and women come from all over the world, couples and singles, and we guide them through practices. We have monthly online calls on Patreon, patreon.com/yoga of intimacy. And there's monthly calls for practice sessions or for men and women. So we'll have those ongoing. And then we also have our new book coming out, Playing with Fire. That's the easiest way to go as a book, you know what I mean? Because it's a minor investment. You can learn all about us. And if this work calls you after reading that book, then you can step into the fire.
And you work with singles as well as couples?
I do, yes. Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, I'll drop all those links below. And I always like to, I do have another question I haven't asked. I'm sorry. Where does the heart come into all this, Justin, as a man?
My definition of heart has changed over the years. So I guess maybe early on, my definition of the heart was the physical muscle in the chest. Maybe a few years later, it became kind of emotionality and emotions, sensitivity beyond the physical, but kind of an emotional sensitivity, kind of empathy, being an empath, so to speak. But ultimately, when I hear the word heart, I don't think of either of those things. the heart is at the center of what is, because this, all of the traditions teach us that this is love, that consciousness is love, that this event is love, that this is love bliss, here now. And it's so hard for us to see it when we're only looking on the surface. But our path is here to remind us that this is love. We are love. We arise from love. This condition is love. This condition arises in love. And when you say heart, it is that. It is the center of that. And that with a capital T. It is the center of that conscious love. It is the very heart. It is divine love. Love of God, divine love, God, heart. So heart is all. Heart is not separate. Heart is what we are. And it is that one heart that we all share. So that's my definition of heart.
I love that one. Thank you. Now, also, if you could just now give one final message to men that are maybe struggling, needing a bit of light and, hope on their path. What can you say to those men, please, Justin?
I would say that I've met some incredible men in my life. And we've all been at really low points. And I think what saved us all was not keeping our suffering to ourselves, finding an outlet, finding a place where you can bring that, and you can recognize how your suffering, whatever you're going through, is a gift that actually serves other men. No matter how dark it feels to you, those other men have seen it darker. And to meet them and to see them where they are, as teachers, as leaders, clean, it's just profoundly inspiring. And you just need to reach out. There's so many men's groups, there's so many opportunities. You don't need to bear it alone. Find some people that you could connect with and talk to at this depth, and let that be your starting point, your avenue. I mean, there's so many streams that open up to us as a result of that, whether it remains just men's work, or you suddenly find yourself as part of a lineage, or traveling abroad and studying in a monastery or an ashram. Who knows where this journey takes you, but follow it, keep going, and let you become a living example of what's possible. Inspire people by walking your talk, walking your path. Walk it. Don't try and tell everyone what to do. Don't try and be successful. Just be successful in what you do. Live it, breathe it, be the real deal. People will see that, and that will be your gift. That's what we need. We need the realness.
Amazing. Wow. I have loved this conversation, Justin. So much really powerful insights and wisdom. And I really want to, so much gratitude. Thank you to you for everything you're doing, and your beautiful wife. So from my heart to yours, thank you so much, Justin.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.
If I could just keep you on a moment, please. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Please like, share, subscribe, get Justin's amazing message out there. And I'll be back in a couple of days with another episode of Heart Warriors.